house, he was still there. He got pretty butt hurt that they didn't
You,
even. Well, they didn't even like discuss with him me leaving and the possibility of him taking my spot. Um,
and it
and they
happens like that in
hired
the restaurant
somebody
industry.
else.
That shit
It
just
does, it
happens.
does. So they hired somebody like they did an outside hire, and he had the most like difficulty with it than anybody else. And I don't remember exactly what happened, but
Y'all
it
haven't talked
was
like you and Ponyville have.
no, we don't stay as close. His mother passed away recently, and
Uh,
I reached out to him when that happened. She'd been battling cancer for a real long time, but I reached out to him when that happened. But I mean, not much has changed about him, dude. You know, he's still
Still goes
binge
to the L
drinking
bar.
alcoholic.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's even allowed in there. He goes wherever he's allowed.
Oh man.
He ended up getting fired from the craft house, and he moved on. But
That shit
yeah,
happens, man. Randy, hope you're doing well if you
it
ever hear
does.
this.
I
So,
hope I hope he's doing all right too. I run into him randomly every now and then, but I think he's doing all right. Who knows?
and so thinking back to when we worked together, that was when you and Catherine first. If you don't mind her name being on the episode, I can bleep it out. If not, but
Yeah, that's
whatever.
fine.
But y'all were first getting married, right? I,
Yeah, did we got married in 15. So did you work there when we?
Yeah,
Oh,
I
you know
remember
what?
the
Yeah.
party. Y'all had that what is that fucking beer called? The Fireman's Four or something like that.
Oh,
Y'all
at
had-
our wedding? Did you go to our wedding?
I didn't go to the wedding. I went to the after party, and I remember about 5 minutes of the after party, and then waking up on y'all's couch and watching Parks and Rec.
Yeah, we did. We did. We watched Parks and Rec all day, and then we had like a limousine and like took it to Whataburger.
Y'all took a limo
that
to
was-
Whataburger?
Yeah, we had this. Her sister's husband let us borrow. Like he knew a guy who knew a guy, and they let us borrow this like '88 Cadillac limousine that had fucking a pair of Longhorns like stuck to the front hood as a hood ornament. You know, that went all the way across the deep crimson red velour from the ink that was inside all those cars. You know, it had like the soft top like on the inside, like
Oh
when you
yeah.
reach up, like the ceiling is all like not carpet, but you know what I mean.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I drove it and took us to Whataburger. Well, I couldn't fit it through the drive-through though, so
Well, that's always the best
we had to
time.
get out. Yeah, yeah.
So,
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to pry that Shiner Bach mustard recipe from you. But other than that, do you have any other special recipes you'd like to share with the very few listening fans?
Yeah, man. Of course. So, okay, Shiner Bach mustard.
And you don't have to
Is
get
a
too
mustard.
technical because I'll get the
No,
recipe
no.
from you and share it in the description. So,
Yeah. It's a mustard custard. So just like you're making a custard, like ice cream or you know pudding, you heat up some liquids, and in this case, it's Shiner, a little bit of Worcestershire, and malt vinegar. It's almost equal parts malt vinegar and Shiner Bach, and then a little bit of Worcestershire. And then you reduce that by about half. And you have to temper it, which is where you like very slowly pour it into eggs while you're whisking. And it's mostly egg yolks. So you temper it into these egg yolks. There's also mixed with the eggs, you've got some sugar, some cornstarch, a little bit of honey, and maybe some corn syrup, if I recall. And you temper it in, and then you put it all back into the pot, put it back on the heat, and bring it up to just to a simmer. And once it simmers, you can just you have to be stirring the whole time. Once it simmers, they'll activate the cornstarch. So you have two different thickening agents going on. You've got the eggs and you've got the cornstarch. If you keep cooking it, you're going to scramble those eggs. So you just want to barely bring it up to a simmer, turn the heat off, and just keep stirring, keep stirring, keep stirring. That'll activate the cornstarch to help thicken. And then you just strain it. And that's pretty much it. And then chill it. That stuff is good for a long time. But you can take that recipe and do so much with it. Like, you don't have to use Shiner Bock. You can use so many other liquids.
Oh, easily. But just being from Texas and that Shiner Bock mustard, that's a staple, you know what I mean? And you can just, your fries and that shit, it's not just a mustard, because I'm not a huge fan of mustard, but that shit is pretty much like ketchup, in my opinion.
Dipping pretzels in it. I did forget to mention one super important ingredient you mix with the eggs is the mustard powder. But, yeah, man, dip pretzels into it. I mean, you put it on a sandwich, you put it on a burger, you put it on anything, really. But yeah, dipping fries in it.
Oh, yeah, that's delicious.
One other special recipe I've got. I've got two, but one is, this one blows people's minds. I make wedding cakes, okay? I make a lot of cakes for people. People they come out the woodwork and they're asking me for cakes.
Because baking culinary arts is an art. Baking is a whole nother fucking thing, man. Like, all of the culinary arts I can think of all kind of are easy to do, but baking, that's a whole nother fucking level.
It is, and a lot of people are surprised to learn that I went to pastry school, not culinary school. And I also worked as a cake decorator, and for a short time I was a chocolatier, making truffles and little chocolates and shit. So one of my secret recipes is my wedding cake recipe. And it's not really a secret. It's just, it takes a lot of practice, and it sounds really simple, and the basic behind it is super simple. And this one, I can tell you the whole recipe because it's so easy. But I start with 1 box of cake mix. Now, there's more to it than that. It is a box of cake mix, though, that you doctor it up. So you don't follow the directions on the back at all. But what you do is you're going to mix, you have to have a high-speed mixer. You have to have a KitchenAid mixer or some sort of stand mixer. But the box of cake mix with 1 cup of flour, 1 cup of liquid, and 1 cup of fat, and 3 eggs. And you literally dump it all together. You mix it on low speed for 3 minutes, and then you whip that shit on high speed for 3 minutes. And you've got an amazing cake batter that is just super over-the-top moist and also stands up really well for tiered cakes. It holds its shape really well. If you take a piece of this cake and you squeeze it, it makes a sound. Like, that's how moist it is. Yeah. And so my standard recipe is, when I say a cup of liquid and a cup of fat, for me a cup of fat would be sour cream, heavy cream, butter.
Whipping cream even?
Yeah, whipping cream. Because all of those, I typically go with sour cream. But you want something at least in the 40% fat range. Butter, it is 80%. I don't know how many times I've tried it with like a cup of melted butter, but that's a lot of fat. I'm not sure what kind of effect that might have on the cake, but sour cream works really well. And then for the liquid, I typically go with either a cup of milk or a cup of buttermilk. And you can add, it doesn't matter what kind of box cake you start with. You can adjust and add flavorings from there to get whatever you're going for. Like, you want the standard wedding cake? Well, that's equal parts vanilla and almond flavoring. So you might add a tablespoon of almond extract, a tablespoon of vanilla extract to that cake. And you would start with a white cake box mix. If you wanted that yellow cake box mix, you would start with that, and you might add a tablespoon of the butter extract flavoring. chocolate cake, I will sometimes replace half the flour. Instead of a cup of flour, I'll do half a cup of flour, half a cup of cocoa powder with a box of chocolate cake mix. And then the real trick to doing this cake, it rises like crazy. And you only need to fill whatever pan you're putting it in about a third of the way. And you actually cook it at 2 different temperatures. So you start off really, really low to make sure that the temperature gets homogeneous throughout the batter, and so that the inside of your cake will set and not collapse. So you start it off at like 300 degrees for about 20 to 30 minutes for a medium to bigger size cake. And then you crank it up to 325 for another 30 minutes or so. You really just have to watch it and know what to look for with a cake, and test it that it springs back when it's done, and that it's very slightly started to pull away from the sides of the pan. But that's pretty much it.
Hell yeah, man. Well, that's awesome. And I don't know if you Jon Favreau. This dude, he's Iron Man's assistant in shows. He did Elf.
Yeah.
The Lion. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen his show on Netflix with the Asian dude Roy Choi.
Yeah.
That show is amazing,
I've watched
man.
that.
And they just recently released their what do you call it? Most recent collection. And Jon Favreau is nerding out over different types of bread. And I've never gotten into baking, and so it's so intriguing to listen to the recipe to me, because that's so weird, because I've always been more of a fry guy. But
well, the big thing to me about baking is that, and I'm not making this assumption about you, but a lot of people look at everything that's not savory cooking, and they call it baking. But in reality, there's 2 big parts, and one is baking and one is pastry. And baking bread is as much a science as it is an art. It requires some... It's just so
from
different.
Watching John on the chef show, it's almost like taking care of a plant or a fish, because yeast, like for baking, rising bread,
sure.
It's a living organism, let alone it's a dumbass living organism. It's still a living organism. So you've got to sit there and tend to it and make sure it's doing okay in the reach-in or wherever you have it,
Bread is one of those things that you really, you can't follow a recipe and expect it to turn out consistently every time. Like if you take all the stuff I told you if I gave you the actual amounts for that Shiner Bock mustard, and you make it tonight, and then tomorrow your wife makes it, and the next day you make it all, and you follow the recipe I give you exactly the same, it's probably going to be exactly the same every single time. If I give you a recipe for a sourdough loaf, and you make it today, and then tomorrow you make it, and then the next day she makes it, there's a chance, and you stay true to that recipe 100%, there's a really good chance that it's not going to be consistent, because it's a living organism and it relies on all these different factors. Is it humid outside today? I mean, today it really is. That has a huge effect on how your bread turns out, is the humidity. The temperature.
Yeah.
When I was at the craft house and I was making donuts like every fucking Sunday morning, even after I quit, I trained Kate, the owner, to make the donuts, and for probably months afterwards.
Just real quick,
like,
did y'all
there were
fry
days
those,
that,
or like?
Yeah, they were fried, but they're yeast risen donuts. Like, so it's a dough, but that you fry instead of bake in the oven. But every Sunday, like, depending on the weather and all these other factors, like every little factor, like how long was the dough in the refrigerated? How long did you let it sit out at room temperature? What's the room temperature today? Because in the kitchen, the temperature varies wildly based on outdoor temperatures. You know what I mean? When it's hot outside, it's crazy hot in the kitchen. And in the dead of winter, sometimes you turn off the hood vent to warm it up because it's so cold in there. You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
and
yeah.
so all of that has a huge effect on your bread. There are some days I'd come in and it's like, the recipe might say to proof this bread for an hour.